You guys ready? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to open this Polk County Board of Commissioners. It is April 13th. Extra agendas are on the table. All commissioners are present. Looking for comments not on this agenda. Hearing none, looking for approval of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I look for approval of minutes from March 30th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And approval of consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous. Arch's presentation, Ashley Hamilton and Jimmy Jones. So would you please introduce yourselves to the record and who you with, please? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Community Action, and we serve Marion and Polk counties and a few other places here and there.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Ashley Hamilton, the Chief Program Officer of Mid-Willamette, overseeing our homeless and housing programs.
It'll pick you up from right where you are. Be comfortable.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to take a few brief moments to kind of introduce what Ashley is going to be talking about primarily today. We're really here for a couple of purposes. One, periodically we like to come out and talk to the Board of Commissioners about the agency's work and how we're helping people in the Polk community in specific. And secondly, every 2 years, the state requires us to come out and get a reauthorization of the Emergency Solutions Grant. That's part of a longer process of our master grant agreement with the state of Oregon. We've been doing that since 2010, and we should have really done it in 2021. But because of COVID and a lot of other things were going on with rental assistance in particular, we hadn't had the opportunity to do that just yet. So we're out here to talk about those two things in particular. I'm going to talk a little bit about the agency's work, specifically in Polk County, that I sent out on this printed sheet last night. And then Ashley's going to talk a little bit about what the full scope of our homeless and housing programs are across our entire geographic footprint. And the purpose of all this is really to give you a sense not only of what we're doing in Polk County, but also to get a sense of how we're using state funds and federal funds in particular in the largest and most comprehensive way, so that you have a full picture of our activities, not only here in Polk, but in the full footprint of our area. So I have spent last night, the evening before, a just general summary of what the agency's work has been in Polk County over 2021. Those dates are a little hard sometimes because we're dealing with so many data systems and so many different programs with so many different barriers sometimes to getting information out of those data systems. So some of it's fiscal year 21, which means that it's not even complete yet. Some of it is calendar year 21, but this is really the sort of best picture that we could pull together out of that mishmash of multiple data systems. And over the course of that, what we see here is that we serve 5,548 Polk residents with about a little bit more than $4 million worth of direct financial assistance. So what's not in that? We stripped out all of our salaries. We stripped out all of our operations costs. This is just the total number of Polk residents served and the total amount of direct financial assistance available. We have not included, in addition to that, any services or resources that are mixed up in a bi-county process. That is, anything that's going to serve residents of both counties that we cannot deaggregate in some way has been excluded from that. So this is actually part of a larger whole, and a considerably larger whole, in fact, in many ways. But I did want to give you at least a baseline for Polk specific services. So if you go through these projects, the Arches project is the one that is providing the most direct financial assistance, in part because of resources that we've been able to assemble there over the last 5 years. Back in 2017, the budget of the Arches project, which is our housing subdivision, was essentially about $2 million. By the time that I went over to the main office to become the executive director, it was around $5 million pre-COVID. Ashley had grown that up to about $12 million, and this past year it's $33 million. Some of that was one-time assistance, about 15 million of it, but the base budget's around $18 million, and that's going to fund not only direct services, but a whole lot of other stuff that we're providing in the community. It'll stabilize, I think, post-COVID, somewhere around $10 to $12 million. But, that's what has been put together along those lines. This is the Arches budget. Again, it's primarily the one that's contributing, I think, the most in terms of direct financial assistance. You will see other projects in here as well. If you flip the page under the second page, you'll find our, the third page, you'll find our weatherization project. That provides low-income homeowners with basic weatherization services, so windows, doors, installation, some health and safety improvements, things along those lines. It looks like we served about 24 Polk County residents and 9 households since July the 1st of last year. And if you look back about 18 months, it's 56 Polk County residents and 27 households over the time since July of 2020, about the moment that COVID began to really impact our community. Energy assistance in the current fiscal year, we have served 1,765 Polk County residents with about $450,000 in light, gas, and water payments. If you go over to the next sheet, you'll see our Head Start program that serves about 145 children in the Polk County geography. You'll also see our Nutrition First program. That's the USDA program. We're one of the last community actions in the state of Oregon to run that program because it's very difficult to run, and it's also something that you really have to subsidize. It doesn't really pay for itself. But what it does is that it works with family-based childcare providers by providing them USDA meal reimbursements to help cut down on the cost of providing those services. And it's actually an incredibly valuable program, but it is very difficult to execute. And we are serving about 511 children, working with those family-based childcare providers throughout Polk County. We run a childcare resource and referral program as well. And that is a training and technical assistance program for family-based childcare providers largely. You'll see the list of facilities that we work with there in Polk County. And one of the things I will call your attention to there is the number of certified centers. I know that the Board of Commissioners talks an awful lot and has investigated the amount of childcare available so that we can get everybody back working as fast as we possibly can. I just want to call attention to that because that 20 there, a lot of that specialized programs like Head Start, it's not childcare in the sense that I think most people think about what childcare is. So we're providing services there that impact a little bit more than 2,000 children in Polk County. And so, the agency has 9 program areas, 6 on the housing side and 3 on the early learning side. 8 of those 9 programs have direct services of some kind or some nature in Polk County. The one that doesn't is the reentry project that we run out at the Marion County Jail, although we do see a few Polk residents here and there in that program as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that if you have them. A lot of the new increases in terms of the financial assistance to Polk County residents this past year was the Oregon Rental Assistance Program. As you probably know, I had a great deal of frustration with that program because it was a state directed program to the extent that they were the ones telling us who we had to serve and in what order. And historically, Brent and I worked very hard to make sure that Polk County gets 20 to 25% of any resources that the state sends to our service district. But I was not able to do so with this program because, they were not concerned about local geographies. They treated the entire Marion Polk region as one entity, and they gave us the clients in the order that they wanted them served. So in the end, I think we ended up, while it wasn't at 20%, I believe we were at 16, 17%, somewhere in that range. But I do believe that, if we'd had a little bit different control over it, we could have got it from 20 to 25 pretty easily. And the areas where we do get additional rental assistance programs from the state, like the STAR program, we've been able to grant subcontract directly with Brent's office at the FCO, usually 20 to 25% of those funds so that he can administer them directly. And that's been very, very successful. The last thing I would say is that we are also providing subrecipient contracts in Polk County. So that you see there at the bottom of page 2 that we subcontracted with Brent's office for $500,000 worth of direct rental assistance. We also help fund the work at FCO, also help fund the work at Gales Lodge, the Domestic Violence Center at Sable House, and then we help to support quite a bit of the warming activities in the community financially. Brent does all the heavy lifting on that.
But do you have the same issues on the rental assistance in West Salem, or is because it's Salem, does it tie into what you have to do without that kind
So
of?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. So the Oregon Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the one that, and there's been so much rental assistance, it's almost shocking to me. I couldn't have ever imagined that there would have, and it's had some problems in a number of different varieties. We rooted out, I believe, most of the fraudulent attempts to access that fund. I'm less confident that the state was able to root some of those things out because they don't know the local landlords, and that's where the struggle comes in. That program eventually pushed out more than $500 million. $500 million. I mean, that is just almost unfathomable in rental assistance across the state. We did some breakdowns of the zip codes where the rental assistance was distributed, and it was incredibly inequitable at times. Even in Marion County, certain parts of Marion County got much heavier assistance than other parts. West Salem, I think, ended up carrying quite a bit of the Polk County share. And part of my frustration was, and I sent this to Commissioner Gordon a couple of times, was I looked at the rental assistance rates in Fall City and Dallas and Willamina and other communities around Polk County. And, we were struggling to get the state to kind of prioritize those applications. So I think that West Salem actually kind of got toward the front of that line. But a lot of rural areas, I think, suffered from that process.
I appreciate your advocacy for rural and more locally responsive distribution mechanisms. And I think that partnership with FCO is so key to that because they also have those relationships on the ground with landlords and other folks. And just it helps community actions reach, I think, with those partnerships. I really appreciate that. And just generally appreciate your management of all of these services during just a cascading number of emergencies. I often think, what if these services didn't exist during the wildfires, during the pandemic? And I think we would see major homelessness and atrocities in our communities that have been avoided. So really appreciate your management of this. And with the rental assistance, I was able to tour the call center, and it looked like a corporate call center. It was really efficient, and I really wish the state would have just said, okay, there's a model there that we can try to replicate or demand of other communities. And so those conversations are ongoing, and your relationships with the state legislators will bear fruit, I think, for our communities as we go forward.
Hopefully this will never be necessary at this scale again. But I do think that they've learned a few lessons about how to do this well. We spent down all of our resources in November of 2021, had a schedule. And after we spent Marion and Polk's allocation, we started spending Lynn, Benton, Lincoln's for those communities and Jackson County for those communities and Brook, Jefferson, and Deschutes for those communities, because we had a staff of 35 there that would just, got really good at this. And we had a 4-step process to prevent or to limit the fraudulent applications getting through. And I think that we did manage to get most of that. Any other questions? Okay, Ashley, if the commissioners are ready, I think I'm gonna turn it over to you.
All right, excellent. Nicole, perfect. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for laying the groundwork for this presentation. So my goal here really today is to give a bird's eye view of what we, AKA known as the Arches Project. So really what that is the Homeless and Housing Division of Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, really laying the foundation of what are our primary objectives, how does that interlay into Polk County, and then kind of ending with what are we here today to do? So that is working for that recertification for the Emergency Solutions Grant, and how does it all kind of fit together into one big picture. Apologize for
just clicking.
There we go. I was right or left. All right. So the Community Resource Program is the formal division within Mid-Willamette, but we call it the Arches Project, and we cover both Marion and Polk County in our services. We have a 4-pillar model, which I've outlaid here today. So the first pillar being our basic needs. So it's really focusing on harm reduction strategies, client-centered work, so shelter, hygiene, food. What does it look like to improve someone's quality of life and or sustain their life? Our secondary primary pillar is supportive services. So that's our barrier removal, educational services. How can we help individuals not only obtain housing, but maintain their housing through tenant education courses, increasing their income through access to vocational rehab or even veteran services. Our third pillar, and probably what we're most renowned for, especially in most recent years, is our coordinated entry. And that, in simple terms, is the identification, triage, and surveying of the homeless or imminent housing risk population in Marion and Polk County. So this helps us through the survey process obtain all those data points and demographics that we use to advocate for our communities and to build evidence-based programming. And then lastly, the solution to homelessness, of course, is housing. So this is where we build a continuum of opportunities from transitional housing to rapid rehousing, and then our most recent work into long-term permanent supportive housing. So just a couple of snapshots within each of these pillars. So within our basic needs work, of course, it's our notable extreme weather response. And this is actually a new naming. We used to call this the warming network, but what we've seen as our climate has changed is we need to be more responsive to the needs of our unsheltered community. So not only being there in nights where it's really cold, but what does it look like to be responsive in heat dome events or wildfires with air stagnations? So we've retagged it as extreme weather response, where we can open up emergency shelters and most notably during the COVID pandemic, hotel stays for our community. Where we've been able to grow over the last several years is really what is known in the bed count category. So a bed night is someone in a bed per night. So we used to have less than 1,000 bed nights when we were going into the season of 2018, 2019. Sorry, 2017, 2018, we've been able to grow this bed night capacity in our region up to 16,000. We even subgrant these opportunities throughout Marion and Polk County so that we're providing, it's more than that total now, almost $200,000 to warming shelter in rural communities. So that includes up in Mill City, here in Polk County, and then also in Woodburn. It's not responsive to my click. Come on. Okay, I'm gonna scroll. Thank you, figured it out. All right. And then also under our basic needs is really outreach. So what we've learned most notably from COVID is as our capacities and our buildings had to be restricted and people couldn't come indoors, it wasn't safe. We had to come up with new mechanisms to reach our population. So that meant building out an outreach population where we can actually give all of the Arches services out in the field, get to know the population, where they're actively at and where they're moving through our communities. So we built a multi-person team outreach that goes out in all of Marion and Polk County in a strategic schedule in order to disseminate our services and create that relationship, but also that access point. So we on average provide around 500 service transactions out in the field every single month. We are strategically out in Polk County 1 to 2 times per week. And if you look at some of the notes here through our through our outreach work, we were able to identify 43 unsheltered individuals in the last fiscal year out in Polk County. So about 43, homeless individuals, about half were actively unsheltered during that point of engagement. So that secondary pillar, I touched on it a little bit, but supportive services. So that's our tenant education, our veteran service office, birth certificates, and navigation. So we're able to provide these courses out in Polk County, and we're really looking to provide more robust options for our tenant education course now that we're moving into a Rent Well series. And we were able to provide for Oregon-born residents those critical birth certificates so they can access long-term services. In our third pillar, we of course have coordinated entry. Our primary access point for these surveys are in Arches located in Marion County. However, we do provide these surveys across all of Marion and Polk County and mobile team opportunities. And so that we're making sure that we're available and these teams can get these surveys done for our critical clientele and get them onto our housing list. On average, we're doing 129 surveys per week. And over the last calendar year, we performed just shy of 1,500 of these assessments for Polk County specific residents. Yes, cool. And of course, our last pillar, apologize, is our housing programs. And so this is just a snapshot of our grant-specific housing programs. They really run the gauntlet of the type and length of service delivery. So we've got programs that can provide this really emergency-based leg up opportunity to prevent homelessness. That's through our rural resource services and our fantastic partnership with the FCO office, as well as longer term housing opportunities where we can provide up to 2 years of rental assistance out in Marion and Polk County, and pair that with case management geared towards self-sufficiency development, with the end goal being once our service concludes, that the individual is able to self-sustain in their unit. So it's a fairly intensive program. And in total, through these services, last calendar year, we were able to successfully place 71 residents in Polk County into our longer term housing initiatives listed. Finicky.
And that was since July last year.
The calendar year, so it's January to December 2021.
That's great.
That is not inclusive of our homeless prevention work through COVID, of course. And just some notable projects that we've brought online over the last year or so is our TANRS project. So that is our regional grant per diem veteran transitional housing project that opened in December of 2020. So it's just over a year old at this point. It has 36 beds for male and female veterans. It can serve both Marion and Polk County residents. It actually can serve anyone statewide, but we've been able to keep it really localized in terms of our residency. We've served 34 veterans at this point, with 16 transitioning into permanent housing. And we have, I think, 5 residents that came to us from referrals distinctly from Polk County, and they were unsheltered prior to enrollment. On site in our TANRS project, we focus on not only case management and resource navigation, but we have critical intersections with and partnerships with the VA so that we can address unmet needs in terms of medical or mental health. And we also have on-site mental health supports and peer support. And this is a really special project to us. It's known as the Arches Inn. So this is fairly new to our portfolio. It's a hotel that we acquired through the Project Turnkey initiative, which was a kind of a legislative project from over a year ago in partnership with Oregon Community Foundation. Right now, it is a shelter for wildfire survivors with a small subset of chronically homeless, medically fragile individuals. It is an 80-room facility. We are occupying the first floor right now and very close to getting our approval to the second floor expansion. It has on-site 24/7 staffing, as well as a partnership with JD Health and Wellness for primary health care, as well as navigation to mental health resources. The reason why I bring this up is not only have we been able to place 2 of our residents who just moved in December, we've been able to move them into their county of choice, which was Polk County. But we are also really excited at the opportunity that Project Turnkey is getting around 2. And so we're really interested in looking at being able to replicate this opportunity specifically in Polk County so that we can have a larger impact for the Polk County residents. We've been working really closely with the state legislators to broaden also the opportunity for turnkey, so they're not specifically looking at hotels. We know that's a limited stock in this community. How can we broaden that to maybe include multifamily complexes? And so we're really optimistic that this is going to come down the pipeline, and we are certainly eager to apply. So the reason I bring this up, all these pieces, is why is this so important? How does it relate to the Emergency Solutions Grant? The reason why we're here today seeking the recertification. So ESG is a federal funding source that is specifically designed to help literally homeless individuals access permanent housing opportunities. It's very finicky to operate. It's not the largest pot of funds, and it's pretty restrictive in terms of what you can use it for, who you can use it on, and the data reporting requirements on the back end. So how we've moved the funds over the course of the years is applying them 100% to salary to run the Arches Day Center, located just in the downtown corridor of Salem. This allows us to free up more of our flexible funding sources to operate more of what you see here today that Jimmy outlined, as well as on this presentation. So that lets us apply more EHA to FCO or warming opportunities versus giving more restrictive grants in those subgrant pots. So our Arches Day Center falls right in our shelter provision category, or our pillar. The Day Center, since we've opened in July of 2019, has seen over 65,000 visits to that space. Those are duplicated. One person can come many times throughout a day or many times throughout a year. On site is not only basic sheltering and bringing them indoor and just offering that daytime respite, but people also have access to mailboxes, of which we have over 1,000 active mailboxes on site. Bus passes, hygiene kits, people are served 2 hot meals a day, as well as an opportunity to get a hot meal in the parking lot from our community partners, showers and laundry services. And what's really important out of that day center is our case management services. So individuals can get direct access to assistance with IDs, birth certificates, signing up for DHS benefits. Our day center most notably recently actually expanded our hours. And so we're open Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 p.m. So we have just added these weekend and evening hours. So just some quick trends over our day center usage. No surprise during the calendar year or fiscal year 20 with COVID, we had a significant decline. So that's that yellow bar in our utilization. That's because our indoor space was capped at the statewide restrictions. But what I really want to point out is our increase. So that's our fiscal year 21. So we've seen a substantial increase now that we've been able to lift these capacity requirements and being able to expand these hours. We're seeing a closer trend back to our pre-COVID utilization rates. And just at a glance, so this would be this fiscal year. So just July to January, we've signed in over 400 new client mailboxes to our bank. We've been providing over 1,500 case management appointments. Almost 10,000 mailboxes have been checked in that 6-month time frame, and delivery of 51,000 meals. Additional services through our day center, we have a partnership with HIV Alliance for HIV screening, as well as a partnership with Marion County and Northwest Human Services for COVID vaccinations and flu vaccinations. We have primary health care on site provided by JD Health and Wellness Monday through Friday, as well as direct transportation to the West Salem clinic through Northwest Human Services. We do veterinary services, as we understand a big portion of our unsheltered population do actually have pets. And so we have clinics specifically for those. Bike storage. We operate in response to these changing climates as well. A great example is today we had the winter warning. And so our day center actually opened at 7:30 at the coldest point of the morning, just today. It also does a variety of partnerships and kind of like resource fairs. And so just 2 weeks ago, we had Helping Hands and Clothing Closet. We were distributing meals out through the day just to kind of bring in more clientele that we don't traditionally see and provide a variety of services right there on site and get them locked into the day center services moving forward.
Actually, could you briefly touch on why the mailboxes are so important?
Oh, absolutely. So the mailboxes are critical when working with the unsheltered population. They need to be able to kind of communicate with our systems of daily life. So whether that's receiving your Social Security check, getting information on housing opportunities that you've signed up for. You have to have a mailing address to get an ID and also get a birth certificate mailed to you. And so all these things are so critical to get documentation to kind of take you up to the next level into your housing experience. We also have mailboxes for individuals who are in domestic violence situations, who are seeking and creating plans to flee, but they don't want their mail and the service providers that they're interacting with to go to their current residence. And so that helps them move forward in their plan of exit.
And the medications in particular, one of the things that we heard in the meeting yesterday was that we have an increased utilization by emergency services going out and helping folks in Polk County who would not need medical treatment if they just had access to their medication. So people can receive their medicines through the mail at this location, and it goes a long way to help manage that issue.
Absolutely. So the Emergency Solutions Grant is 100% applied to staffing in our day center. A key component of the Emergency Solutions Grant is it has a requirement to actually log service transactions and daily users into a database known as the Homeless Management Information System. So it's a little finicky, but what I wanted to show you here today is how we're meeting the data compliance of that grant, and so that we're upholding kind of the quality of service delivery that was really required from this work. So the Emergency Solutions Grant is tested in HMIS using a report known as the CAPER. And so just some quick stats pulling up this CAPER. We at the day center, anyone is allowed in. It's an open public domain, so you can be unsheltered, you could be tenuously housed. But as you can see kind of in that second bullet point there is the bulk of our users are an unsheltered, they are unsheltered, excuse me. So between January and February of 2022, we had 343 unique users into the day center space that were unsheltered, 8% veteran rate, and the majority of them were adults. So we had very few minors, but we did have a couple youth, so below the age of 24, but over the age of 18. A couple prevention, so that would be really specifically individuals who are in imminent housing risk, where they fell into homelessness episodically and they came into the day center, but then were able to self-resolve. This is going to be interesting. So this is what the report looks like. So as you can see, it kind of churns out a variety of data elements. And the only things that I really like to point out here is, of course, it shows the total number of persons served unduplicated during that time frame, but it has an interesting number of chronically homeless individuals. So just over half of the individuals served in our day center are chronically homeless. And that's 182 personnel. Individuals, excuse me.
Just define chronically homeless.
Oh, absolutely. So chronically homeless is really, it's a HUD-based definition to indicate that this individual has been homeless for a really long time. So they fell into homelessness and they haven't been able to self-resolve, or they haven't been able to access resources to get them back into housing. So that can happen after 12 months of consistent homelessness or episodic homelessness over a multiple year time frame. So they kind of fell in and out of homelessness over time. So it's just kind of showing that the situation is not resolving. So about more than half of our users into the day center are chronically homeless. And of course, these are just more data elements where I pulled kind of information on veteran status, who has social security numbers logged into the system. But really the primary point here is just, again, showing our data compliance for this program. All the way to the far right is the percentage of air rate. So when operating this program, your percentage of air has to be below 5% in these HUD universal data elements. As you can see, we're a little high in getting those social security numbers. ESG does have a waiver for that, just working with populations that don't necessarily have that information. But that can be cleaned up a little bit. But so as you can see that we have a pretty good data compliance record with our ESG services. And these are just some additional demographic breakdowns, like the age group who's using our day center. Our primary users are over the age of 25. And of course, the racial breakdowns. So in all, we receive $243,000 in change every year from Oregon Housing Community Services in ESG. So this is a state statute that community actions receive this ESG funding, but is also required that we communicate with our regional counties as well as our local continuum of care to receive that recertification component, so that everyone knows how we're allocating these funds, the intention of the funds, who we're serving, as well as that data compliance component. So of the 243, there's a small sliver that does go to the administration, but the bulk of it goes straight into our shelter operation salary. So I kind of broke it down even further there. I guess there's a little bit for repair and maintenance, 38,000, but the bulk goes to that salary for a manager, 2 coordinators, and our shelter assistants. So really what we're looking for today is requesting formal approval from Polk County for the OHCS ESG allocation for the utilization of these funds to sustain the Arches Day Center for not only fiscal year 21, which would be July 2021 to June of 2022, but also for the next fiscal year. all the way until June 2023. This is a biannual recertification, and this is just a snip of the document that I provided Nicole yesterday that we're looking to have signed. And that reaches the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
A couple.
Yeah.
What is, are those 343 people, is that indicative of the total folks, chronic illness folks in Salem? Do you have a sense of greater communities that aren't accessing that service that might be eligible to?
So there are generally, the numbers we use are there are 1,800 literally homeless individuals in the urban growth boundary of Salem Kaiser.
Okay.
Of those 1,800, probably 500 at any one time are in a sheltered situation. Another 300 or so are in automobiles. It's probably actually a little bit higher at the moment, spread all over the urban growth boundary. That leaves about 1,000 people who are staying outside at any one time. So what we see is that we have certain, a third of that is frequent high users of the day center. And then, there are other individuals who come maybe once every 2 months or once every 90 days and that sort of thing. Part of my long-term frustration, I think, is that, whenever you're providing these kinds of services, which are absolutely necessary to keep people alive, you're also geographically concentrating them in one particular area, right? Whether it is within one county or the other county, or even within the city of Salem. I think we do a pretty good job in the downtown. I don't think we do such a great job in the eastern part of Salem, over there on Lancaster North, Lancaster East. That's been a harder thing for us. And that's part of the reason we've invested so much in outreach in the last few years, is so that we can take services out there. So when the heat dome incident last June, which killed hundreds of people across the greater Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, we lost 2 people, maybe 3, depending on, it's very difficult to determine, correlation, cause of death, those sorts of things. But, we provided 5,000 bottles of water over those 2 days through our coordinated outreach, and 1,000 pounds of ice, which actually isn't as much ice as it sounds like, because ice is pretty heavy. But, if it's direly necessary that happens to keep people alive in those kinds of circumstances, but it has always been troubling to me on some level that you have, in order to make this work, you have to geographically concentrate it, but at the same time, it's a limiting factor in terms of the distribution of the population.
I'll also add that I think that number is relatively low, still related to the constraints of COVID. We didn't increase our capacity numbers until, I want to say, the late fall of 2021. And so still we were operating the bulk of 2021 with a capacity of 25. And then we had a small sliver of time where we were at 55 and still having to rotate people every hour. And so just not only having a capacity limiter, but having to move people every hour in and out of the space for cleaning, that's just a barrier that people don't want to have to contend with. And so we actually provide external services outside in our parking lot. So if people just need to check their mail, if they just want to grab a lunch, it's just not the indoor congregate space that they're really needing. We don't tabulate those numbers outside. We just give them their mail. We want to help them where we can, and they move on. So I would say, because of COVID limiting factor and how we had to alter our service model, there's a much broader swath of individuals who are accessing these services. I ran this report just on our mail services alone, which kind of gives a better figure. And we actually saw closer to 700 unique visitors during that time frame, if you look at just the mail.
Getting back to the other part of your question, Commissioner, you asked about the chronically homeless rate. So normally, nationally, a chronic homeless rate would be around 20%. That would be where it would top out. In Salem in particular, it's around 50%. And that goes back to several factors, but the 2 primary ones are 5 years ago, there were 22 permanent supportive housing beds in Marion and Polk County, while there were 850 in Eugene. So there was nowhere to send them. Right. So there was that piece, and we're up around 350 permanent supportive housing beds at the moment. We probably need 700 to be able to make a real difference there. And then the other thing that I think that is lost sometimes is that, going back 30 years ago, Salem was, you had a concentration of mental health in the community. You had a concentration of incarceration and people exiting. Now, the Oregon state law is that people are returned to their county of origins once they leave incarceration. But there's an internal migration back. And, I talk to my colleagues in Portland all the time. And I say, one of the narratives that we hear frequently is that Portland is shipping its homeless down to us. And they laugh when I say that, because what's happening to them as they experience it is that everyone in Oregon is coming to Portland. So there are some internal migration issues there. And I think that chronic rate being so high, there's a reflection of those two factors.
I personally would suggest that Portland is maybe not carrying the narrative far enough if they're suggesting that their influx or migration is just from Oregon. So I know that we'll argue over that, but
Yeah. Well,
I don't believe that.
I think they don't believe that. I think they would agree with you. I think the service providers would agree with you. I think the problem, well, there are many problems in Portland, but on this particular issue, the public policy issue is that, they have not done enough to maintain public safety and public order. And then they have not provided safe camping alternatives to an unsheltered population that's currently beyond their capacity. But if you, like I was trying to say yesterday, if you were to turn back the clock 40 years, downtown Portland didn't look the way it looks today. The Springwater Corridor didn't look the way that it looks today. The 205 interchanges didn't look the way that it looks today. So this is a large part of it is just the sort of cold economic realities of the current rental market and all of the housing cost issues and the affordability crisis that we're having. But a significant percentage of it too is just some really bad public policy choices made in that city going back for a generation.
Thanks for plugging that in, Jimmy, because I was going to finish your sentence if you didn't.
Yeah.
Because that is the difference from my point of view. We've built a lot of homes in that 40-year period.
Yep.
We have in this state, but we have a lot of challenges. Some of it, a big portion of it, is about policy on building more homes, and I'm generally supportive of those policies. So I don't want us to look like Central California. However, one of the concerns that I have also in that policy realm, and I don't expect that you'll have the answer necessarily, but I do want to address it, is at what point in your process going forward do you have to have validation of citizenship? So how many of these clients that we're serving, and what's just a general percentage, because I expect that number is going up, are undocumented.
So are undocumented in the sense that they're not citizens of the United States. So we have seen a little bit of that in the last couple of years. I wouldn't say that it's a very large percentage, less than 1% at the moment.
It has to be. We're not keeping great records on that. And the only primary reason is I would say 99% of our funding streams have opened the door to be able to serve individuals regardless of citizenship status. And so the request of a social security number or any proof of citizenship isn't considered best practice within our funding streams. And so we're not really collecting that data unless it's provided to us voluntarily. And so it's hard to gauge.
We have had a few individuals in the last 2 years in particular who we knew were undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
But I think going 4 or 5 years back, I don't recall any at all.
No.
I think that is more common among folks who are receiving services from the agency and other program areas, the Energy Assistance Program in particular, but those are federal funds, and by rule, for example, if you have a household where 3 people are documented and 2 people are undocumented, the payment has to be proportional to the number of citizens that are in the household. But we do see that more frequently. The Social Security issue that you saw in the CAPER report with a 13% non-compliance rate there, sometimes that is because we're dealing with a population that has mental health acuities that are so poor, they don't know what the Social Security number is. They've lost it and haven't seen it in 5 years. Sometimes it's because they're sort of distrustful that, that's going to be a pathway to you to turn them over to law enforcement if they have open charges somewhere that they want to secure, or hiding from families. That's another thing that we see. But I think that's something to watch as we go forward.
One of the interesting parts of our conversation on Monday with all the cities was just that I can't remember who made the point, maybe you, Jimmy, that these factors are not new: addiction, domestic violence, developmental disabilities, etc. What are these macroeconomic forces that are helping to drive? There's no singular cause, right, of homelessness, but housing affordability is probably the number one thing I hear from constituents and the concerns about it. And it's tough to, at a county level, to counteract those big macro issues, but we can make progress. And another thing I hear from providers in Polk County is lack of transitional housing here. So we're going to be focusing on prevention of chronic homelessness, right? And then people conceive of homelessness as chronic exclusively often, but there's so much more to the story. So, and I think our strategic planning, our data gathering will help determine those needs. But if you have any thoughts on that,
Well, those are big questions, and I don't have the answers to them, but I will have a couple observations. So the transitional housing issue is largely an unforced error. So we had a lot of transitional housing 15 years ago. HUD decided at the national level that it didn't work very well and it wasn't accomplishing what they wanted. And so they unfunded most of it. And so a lot of that transitional housing just went away. And when you look at the research, it actually worked where it was well designed. Like anything else in life, when it was well designed, it works. When it was poorly designed, it didn't work. And when there were other supports around it, and especially, for me, so we're about to open this navigation center in Salem, and I've railed for months that if we do this, there has to be exit outcomes attached to it. That is, the housing authority has to get on board so that we make sure that when people leave the navigation center, that they have a place, a voucher at least, to go into. If those systems aren't aligned like that, then we're just sort of warehousing people. So a lot of transitional housing programs had time limits where once the 2 years, for example, were up, they didn't have those other exit outcomes attached to it, so they didn't function well. So it wasn't a problem with the transitional housing project necessarily, it was all the other pieces around it. So everybody's backing off on that a little bit now, especially with the large unsheltered issue on the West Coast. These turnkey motels are basically transitional housing. A lot of the other Tanner's project is basically transitional housing. And there's a really important role for that. So I think we're going to see more of that in the future. In terms of those macroeconomic issues, so if you're 50 years of age or older, the population growth in the United States has been so great the last 30 years. The premium on land in particular is very high. The cost of construction is very high. And there's also a larger public policy question about what do we want Oregon to be? What do we want our counties to be, 20 years from now? Do we want to encourage migration from other parts of the country here? And so we're going to have to build a lot more housing than what we have. Or do we want to kind of, make sure that the population that we have here now are healthy, are stable, are thriving, are doing well economically, and those sorts of things. These are big, big choices. But from a functional perspective, the reason that a lot of low-income individuals are really struggling and becoming homeless is that they just can't afford the cost of rentals. We have a pretty high percentage of our population across the state that are in rental properties. I know a lot of my friends and family that are in rental properties saw their cost increase for a 3-bedroom duplex in 2018 from $950 up to nearly $1,800 today. So it's
50% increases.
Yeah,
in the pandemic.
It's just crazy. So what that's going to fuel, and you've already seen it. And part of my frustration with the state's rental assistance approach is that money was really going to a lot of folks who could primarily pay their own rent, in the 50 to 80% AMI range. And meanwhile, we have an exodus of people from housing that are only going to create a larger unsheltered crisis. So I don't know how this is going to watch out. I do know that all of the forces that are creating homelessness now are getting worse. So what we see now in Salem is nothing compared to what it's going to look like 10 years from now. The curve is still increasing. We won't see a peak probably for another decade. And then, so the time to solve the problems or interdict them, to keep them from being monumentally terrible is now.
I'm ready to move to formally approve the ESG grant, if that's the adequate motion.
I'll second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. Do y'all have any other questions for us?
Appreciation too of our partnership for the coordinated homelessness office project. Community Action will be a key player there, and and I just want to also say, we have a very new continuum of care one of my fears is that if we don't solve the problem tomorrow or eliminate the evidence of homelessness in our communities, that we're not doing our job. But really, we're starting to respond to a major issue that is growing, as you say, and yeah, it's going to take more work. No.
It's going to take more work.
Yeah.
So I sometimes talk about this in terms of, I use a lot of metaphors because I'm from the South, but drives her crazy. Sort of like a bathtub. And if you've got a drain in the bottom of the bathtub and you have a spigot at the top and you have the water coming into the bathtub, but there's more water coming into the tub than there is exiting from the drain at the bottom, eventually it's going to run over the side. And that's what we're seeing happening right now. We don't have enough people exiting the system and we have too many new people entering it. And that's why I continue to say it's going to get worse. So we all need to have a little bit of strategic patience. It took us 30 years to get to the mess that we're in right now. It's going to take a long time to get out of it.
I did a little research on other more established continuums of care, and with the chronically homeless, the real tough people to treat, they're looking at success rates of about 30%, getting 30% of those people into more permanent housing situations. Is that a realistic goal for us, do you think?
I would love 30%. So part of the reason we jumped into this turnkey stuff, and I got to tell you, I am very skeptical of motel models. And the reason for that is that they have historically been incredibly expensive. And then you pay for somebody's 2-week motel stay, you spend a couple $1,000s on that or more. And then at the end of 2 weeks, what do you have? You have another homeless person. So, but this model was a little bit different because we had the property so we could continue to keep people in there until we had an exit outcome. And, we weren't shelling out very large sums of money to keep people in those. They're still expensive to operate. That motel on Hawthorne that we purchased is going to cost us around $1.4 million a year to operate. But that's because we have 24/7. We have on-site mental health, all these other things around it. But we can probably put 100 people in there once it's fully renovated. And so if we can take 100 out of the 1,000 folks that are in, the urban growth boundary, that's a 10% reduction. We get another one. Let's say and we haven't even looked at any property and things like that. Let's say we buy a 10-unit facility somewhere in Polk County, and we maybe get 15 or 20 people, about 15 people into that. That's a sizable reduction in the unsheltered number in Polk County. So I do think there are ways to have more immediate results, but it is, everybody has to be realistic about what this really looks like.
One of the focus of the Polk County project is prevention, focusing on folks at risk. Obviously, there are literally homeless people in Polk County, and we need to support them. But this is really looking, how do we stave off a bigger crisis in the future? So looking forward to our partnership there.
We're glad to do it.
I'd just like to tell you both, thank you. Serving on your committee, I got to see what you two do on a daily basis, and tell you both congratulations, because you were smart enough to lock her up with promotion. Congratulations on your promotion.
She's the brains behind the whole thing. I get all the credit, but she does all the work. That's always been the dynamic in this. So
Actually, you've done an amazing job. So I was really excited to see that. So thank you very much. Yeah.
thank you.
Length of service awards, Matt Hawkins.
Good morning. So yes, today we don't have either of these individuals here, but we still want to recognize them for the record. We would like to recognize Jody Germond for 15 years of service to the county. She works in the sheriff's office. And then second, we would like to recognize Diana Aris-Mendez for 20 years of service to Polk County, and she's been with public health that whole time.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you both to Jody and Diana. Is there a need for an executive session?
No, sir.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.